My name is Matthew, and I am 77 years old. That number, when said aloud, feels both monumental and absurd. Inside, I still feel like the man who courted Elaine on warm summer evenings and danced with her in the kitchen to the scratchy sounds of old jazz records. Outside, time has left its unmistakable imprint: thinning white hair, joints that crack with every motion, a slight stoop in my posture that no amount of straightening can fix. Still, I live alone. I keep my own schedule. And on most days, I manage quite well. This particular Sunday had begun with quiet purpose. I had risen early, as always, 5:30 sharp. Years of working in logistics and accounting left me with a deeply rooted rhythm. Even now, retirement doesn't shake it. I brewed my usual pot of black tea and stepped onto the back porch where the morning light fell over the ivy-laced fence and onto the creaking wooden planks Elaine once insisted we stain every spring. She's been gone 12 years. Cancer, swift and brutal. Sometimes I still catch myself reaching for her mug in the cupboard, as if expecting her to stroll in wearing that faded green robe, humming tunelessly. She had a way of filling silence with comfort. I thought of her that morning more than usual. Maybe it was the dinner I was supposed to attend later. Melania's invitation had come unexpectedly 3 days earlier. "We're doing a barbecue," she said, her tone hurried but warm. "Darren's making those steaks you like. Come around 6." I had smiled to myself after hanging up. It had been some time since Melania asked me over without prompting. A long time, in fact. Things hadn't been the same since Darren entered the picture. All smiles and handshakes at first, but over the years the warmth had waned, replaced by strained politeness. Still, I planned for the evening with optimism. I laid out my navy blue shirt, the one Elaine always said made me look distinguished. I stopped by the bakery on Main to pick up a lemon tart, Melania's favorite. The anticipation made me feel younger somehow. Then, at 3:48 p.m., the message came. "Dad, I'm so sorry, but you can't come tonight. Darren doesn't feel comfortable having you over. Maybe next weekend?" That was it. No elaboration, no apology that felt like more than formality. I stared at the screen, rereading the message as if it might rearrange itself into something kinder. I felt the blood drain from my face. My hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from something much deeper: disbelief, confusion, hurt. "Darren doesn't feel comfortable having you over." Those were the words that echoed longest. I wasn't being uninvited because of illness or weather or a scheduling mix-up. I was being excluded, deliberately. My presence, unwanted. Not just by Darren, but by my daughter, who allowed it. I sat in my chair by the window, the lemon tart still on the counter. The minutes ticked by, and the silence in the house grew louder. I remembered the thousands of moments I had shared with Melania over the years, taking her to ballet lessons, helping her build science fair projects, comforting her through her first heartbreak. And this is how it ends? My chest ached. Not the physical pain of age, but the deeper kind that comes when the people you love stop seeing you as human and start seeing you as an inconvenience. I stood up, walked slowly to my study, and opened the old oak file cabinet. I hadn't touched it in months. Dust blanketed the brass handles. Inside were neatly labeled folders, a habit born from years in finance. Everything from car insurance payments to old tuition checks. I pulled out the ones labeled Melania Education, Melania Wedding, Melania House, Ridgeview Drive, and Grandchildren Tuition. I placed them on the desk and began reading. There it all was, the full record of my giving. Her first car, $7,200, paid in full. Her college tuition, 4 years, over $112,000. Their wedding, $28,600, including the catering Melania insisted on. When Darren's business was floundering, I bailed them out with $24,000 in private loans. never repaid. And 3 years ago, when they couldn't secure a mortgage, I wired $387,000 to purchase the house outright in their name. The documents filled the desk in front of me. Over 230 receipts, contracts, and transfers. I spent hours calculating it all, carefully, methodically, the way I used to manage company ledgers. The total, adjusted for inflation and interest, just over $650,000. A lifetime's worth of support. Quiet, unconditional generosity. Not a cent asked back. And for what? A text message. That evening, I didn't eat the tart. I put it back in the fridge and turned off my phone. I didn't respond to Melania's message. I didn't call to ask for clarification. There was nothing more to say. Instead, I sat in the study, surrounded by the paperwork of a father's devotion, and I made a new plan. A cold, clear plan. Elaine would have told me to sleep on it, to be calm, to forgive. But Elaine wasn't here anymore, and I was tired of being silent. It was time to take back control. Monday morning arrived quietly, but the air felt different. Not just outside, inside me. There was no trace of the usual dull ache in my chest that lingered after another reminder that I had become a bystander in my family's life. Instead, there was a quiet certainty, like the click of a lock turning after being stuck for years. I rose early, as always. The morning routine grounded me. Hot tea, toast, a glance through the paper. But this time, I didn't linger over the crossword or look through the obituaries for names I recognized. Instead, I went straight to the study. The documents I'd reviewed the night before still lay spread across my desk in tidy order. 237 receipts, transfers, and notes I'd made over the years to track my support of Melania and her family. I looked at them differently now, not with the warmth of nostalgia, but with the clarity of accounting. These were not gifts, they were investments, and every one of them had returned nothing but distance. At 9 sharp, I picked up the phone and dialed Holman Financial Services, the private bank I'd used since retiring. A soft voice answered after 2 rings. "Good morning, Eliza speaking. How may I assist you today?" "Yes, Eliza," I said calmly. "This is Matthew Hollis. I need to cancel all recurring payments, standing orders, and scheduled transfers associated with my daughter, Melania Hollis, and her family, effective immediately." There was a slight pause. I imagined her glancing at the screen, surprised by the scope of the request. "Sir, just to confirm, you'd like to cancel all transactions related to those accounts?" "Yes, everything. Auto debits, tuition fees, phone bills, car insurance, mortgage support, streaming services, all of it. If it's linked to their names, addresses, or accounts, I want it stopped." She hesitated, the professional warmth in her voice faltering. "Of course, Mr. Hollis. Please allow me a moment to pull up the complete list." Clicking followed, then a sharp intake of breath. "Sir, I'm seeing 174 active transactions linked to either your daughter, her husband, or their children. Some are annual, some monthly, others weekly." "Cancel them all," I said again, slowly, as if I were speaking to myself as much as to her. "Every last one." "I can do that," she said gently. "But I do have to inform you that some of these affect their mortgage, college savings, health insurance." "That's their concern now," I interrupted. "Not mine." A long pause. Then, "Understood, sir. I'm processing the cancellations now. It may take a few minutes." As I waited, I looked at the picture on my desk. Elaine in her garden, smiling over a bed of wild daisies. I wondered what she would say if she were still here. Likely, she'd put her hand over mine and say softly, "It's time, Matthew. It's been time for years." Eliza's voice returned. "All payments have been halted. Future deductions are blocked. Additionally, I've added a security lock on your account. No external changes can be made without written, in-person authorization. Good, I said. There's one more thing. I want to revoke my power of attorney, financial and medical. Both are currently assigned to my daughter. That ends today. Another long pause. Yes, sir. I see that here. Melania Hollis is your designated agent. Shall I email the revocation forms to you? No? Courier? I want them in my hands today. You'll receive them by 3 p.m. They'll require notarization. Already scheduled. She hesitated. Mr. Hollis, is everything all right? The question hit harder than I expected. She was the first person in years to ask without expecting anything from me. I believe, I said slowly, for the first time in a long while, things are going to be just fine. After I hung up, I sat in my recliner. The house was still. The silence wasn't oppressive. It was cleansing. For the first time, I wasn't buried beneath obligations. I wasn't a crutch or a silent wallet. I was just a man, 77, with his wits intact, finally doing something for himself. I stood, walked to the kitchen, poured another cup of tea, and felt something unusual. Lightness. The kind you get when a long pain finally subsides. I had expected guilt. I had expected a pang of loss. But instead, what I felt was relief. A sweeping, almost dizzying relief. No more pretending. No more being the quiet old man who gave and hoped for a thank you. No more phone calls about money. No more dinners where I smiled through silence. No more power of attorney in the hands of someone who used me. With that, I walked back into the study, opened the drawer, and turned off my phone. Not muted. Not silent. Off. They would call. Oh, they would call. When the mortgage payment bounced, when the car insurance went unpaid, when the kids' tuition portal showed a red flag, they would call, and I wouldn't answer. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was done giving more than I got. Done being treated like a burden after a lifetime of sacrifice. I opened a new leather-bound notebook, the one Elaine gave me for my 70th birthday. For your memoirs, she had said with a wink. On the first page, I wrote, Matthew's new chapter. Underneath, I made my list. Revoke POA, in progress. Cancel payments, done. Meet with lawyer for will revision. Take trip to the coast. Declutter workshop. Join the community chess club again. Try Elaine's blueberry pie recipe. The list wasn't long. It didn't need to be. It was the first list I'd made in years that was about me. As I sat there in the warm quiet of my home, I looked out the window and realized something I hadn't felt in decades. I was free. Not abandoned. Not alone. Just free. And this was only the beginning. The next morning, the world looked different. Not because the sun was any brighter or the birds chirped louder, but because I was finally seeing things not through the fog of obligation, but with clarity. For the first time in years, I had no calls to return, no requests to weigh, no quiet expectation lingering on the edge of every conversation. I was free, not from people, but from guilt. By 9 a.m., I was in my study, the desk clear except for a folder marked Matthew Hollis, Personal Affairs. I tucked it under my arm and stepped out into the summer air, locking the door behind me. I paused for a moment on the porch and looked at the house. I had lived here for over 40 years, raised Melania within these walls, carried Elaine over the threshold. So many versions of me had walked through this door, but today was different. Today, I was walking out for myself. The branch of Holman Financial Services on Westbridge Avenue looked the same. Polished glass doors, tall hedges trimmed to geometric perfection. But stepping inside, I no longer felt small or apologetic. A young man named Devon, sharply dressed and too eager, ushered me into a private meeting room with dark walnut panels and a faint smell of coffee. Mr. Hollis, he said, pulling up my file, it appears everything is in order. All 174 recurring payments to Melania Hollis and affiliates have been successfully terminated. That includes tuition fees, mobile accounts, car leases, insurance policies, even their house maintenance plan. I nodded slowly, savoring the words. Good. And the account freeze on third-party modifications? Active as of this morning. No changes can be made to your account without your in-person approval, notarized. Excellent. One more thing. Devin raised an eyebrow. I want all communication from the bank to be directed to me alone. No proxies, no exceptions. He typed something quickly. Done. Anything else I can help you with today? I shook his hand. You already have. The walk from the bank to the law offices of Horace and Kane was only 5 blocks, but it felt like a pilgrimage. Each step forward seemed to shed years off my shoulders. Margaret Kane met me in her office, the same one where Elaine and I had updated our will the year before she passed. A framed picture of Margaret with her Labrador sat on the corner of her desk. She was brisk, practical, but had always treated Elaine and me with respect. I take it this is not just a routine update, she said, pulling out my old file. It's a complete overhaul. We sat down and reviewed the will I'd left unchanged for nearly a decade. Originally, it divided everything evenly. Half to Melania, half split between my 2 grandchildren. Darren was never mentioned by name, but as Melania's husband, he stood to inherit indirectly. Not anymore, I said. I want a trust established, in my name, for my granddaughter. Margaret looked up. Her pen paused. Not for both grandchildren? No, I said without hesitation. Only Amelia. She's the only one who's spoken to me honestly, and even that took courage. I laid out my plan. The bulk of my estate, including the house, my savings, and remaining investments, would go into the trust. Amelia would receive support for university, housing, and a modest stipend while she pursued education or stable employment. The trust would remain inaccessible for frivolous spending and tightly controlled until she turned 30. She'll need a trustee, Margaret said. Someone you trust. You, I replied. Margaret blinked, then smiled. All right. And Melania? A single disbursement, I said. Enough for her to know I didn't erase her, but not enough to reward betrayal. And I want it clear. This is final. No contest clause. She challenges it. She gets nothing. And Darren? Nothing, I said simply. Not a cent. Not a mention. I've paid for his lifestyle for years. That's over. Margaret nodded and began typing. As she worked, I stared out the window. The city moved around us. People walking, rushing, talking, buying, living. It was a hum I hadn't paid attention to in a long time. I'd been too busy watching my life through the lens of sacrifice. By early afternoon, the paperwork was complete. Margaret placed a thick stack of documents in front of me. "You're sure about this, Matthew?" she asked. "I've never been sure." I signed. Page after page. My signature flowed with confidence, not resignation. "You'll receive official copies by Friday," Margaret said. "We'll file the new will, establish the trust, and handle any disputes, should they come." "They will come," I said, "but they won't matter." As I left the office, the world looked different again. Brighter, simpler, fairer. I stopped at a cafe for a sandwich, a simple turkey on rye, and ate without checking my phone, without watching the time. Just eating, just being. I watched people pass by, young couples, tired parents, laughing teenagers. Life was continuing, indifferent to my decisions. And that was the beauty of it. Life didn't need my permission to move on, and neither did I. On a whim, I wandered into a department store. I hadn't bought anything for myself in years, not really. My wallet was a relic, the leather faded and cracked. I found a new one, black with a clean fold, and bought it without hesitation. I walked out with a new wallet, a fresh notepad, a comfortable pair of walking shoes, and a dark blue fedora I never would have dared wear before. Then, as if guided by memory, I entered the bookshop at the corner of Pine Street, the same one Elaine used to love. Inside, the scent of old paper and new bindings welcomed me like an old friend. I browsed slowly, running my fingers along the spines. I picked up a historical novel I'd once wanted to read, but always postponed. There was always something else to do, someone else to help. Not anymore. I bought the book and walked out into the fading afternoon, the bag light in my hand, but my heart lighter still. As I turned the corner onto my street, I thought about what I had done, about the trust, the will, the cancellations, the quiet refusal to be used. It wasn't about revenge, it was about respect. And for the first time in a long, long time, I was giving that to myself. It was late afternoon when the knock came. 3 slow, deliberate taps. Not the harsh, impatient knock of a delivery driver or the rehearsed courtesy of a neighbor. It was soft, cautious, like someone wasn't sure they'd be welcome. I rose from my chair, the one I always sat in to read the paper or just to think, and peered through the narrow glass sliver by the door. It was Amelia, my granddaughter. She stood with a backpack slung over her shoulder, a little out of breath, as if she had walked fast from the station or maybe hadn't stopped pacing since the moment she left home. Her brow was furrowed, and her eyes flickered with a strange combination of anger and confusion. I opened the door without a word. "Grandpa," she said. Her voice was softer than I remembered. "Can I come in?" I nodded and stepped aside. She entered slowly, taking it all in, the same house she had played in as a child, now seemingly smaller, quieter, a little dustier perhaps. But it hadn't changed. I hadn't changed. She set her backpack down by the coat rack. "I came straight from class. Mom? She's furious. She said you've cut them off. She said you canceled everything and changed the will and turned off your phone." I didn't believe her at first, but then her voice trailed off, but I understood what she meant. Then she realized I hadn't answered her text either. "I wanted to hear it from you," she said. "Is it true?" I motioned to the couch. "Sit. I'll make us some tea." She sat down in the same spot Elaine always favored, beneath the window where the light hit just right in the afternoon. I moved about the kitchen with a deliberate calm, boiling water, placing cups on a tray, steeping the leaves like Elaine taught me decades ago. I had the sense that today needed to be quiet, not rushed or overly dramatic. When I returned, she looked up at me like a granddaughter again, not a curious spectator. "Yes," I said simply. "It's all true." "But why now?" she asked, accepting her cup. "Because I finally saw it for what it was," I said. "For too long, I convinced myself that I was helping, supporting, being a good father, a good grandfather. But in truth, I was just a convenient bank account." Amelia flinched a little, then nodded. She had expected the answer, part of it at least. "I gave them everything," I continued. "The house, the car, tuition, grocery payments, phone bills. Every time they had a shortfall, it was me they called. Every time they wanted to travel, to host a dinner, to make themselves look good, it was my money they used." "They made it sound like it was their effort," she whispered. I smiled without warmth. "That's how it's always been. I watched Darren take credit for being a provider while cashing checks I wrote. I listened to your mother talk about sacrifices she made, while never once acknowledging the hand behind her comfort." Amelia looked down into her tea, swirling it absent-mindedly. "I've seen it too," she said quietly. "For years. The way they speak about you when you're not around. The things they say." She hesitated. "Say it," I urged. "They say you're old, that you're clinging to relevance, that you'll be gone soon. And when you are, At least they'll have the house, the money, something to show for all the years they tolerated you. It should have hurt more, hearing it so plainly, but I had suspected it for a long time. Her words merely confirmed the cold truth. "And you?" I asked. Amelia blinked. "What about me? Do you feel the same?" She looked up quickly, eyes wide, hurt blooming in them. "No. God, no. Grandpa, I came because I needed to tell you that. I've never felt that way. I've always loved you. I know I haven't visited enough or called as often as I should have, but I see what they've done. I see how they've treated you, and I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner." She leaned forward, voice trembling. "I didn't know how. I'm just one person, and it's my family." "You're my family too," I said. "The only one who showed up." We sat in silence after that, the kind that was thick with understanding and unspoken apology. Outside, the sky had begun to shift into a pale lavender, the kind of summer twilight that stretches long and soft over the rooftops. "I heard about the trust," she said, after a while. I nodded. "It's yours, to support your education, your independence. Not a reward, not a prize, just a foundation." She swallowed hard. "I don't want it because they lost it. I want it to mean something. I want to make you proud." "You already have," I said. Amelia got up, walked around the room, touched the photos on the bookshelf. Her grandmother, younger versions of herself, a picture of Melania as a teenager. "What are you going to do now?" I smiled. "Whatever I want." She laughed, a soft, surprised sound that filled the room like sunlight. "I was hoping," she said slowly, "that maybe I could stay a few days, if that's okay. I want to be here, with you, not out of guilt, just because I want to." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. My throat tightened unexpectedly. "Of course," I said. "You're always welcome." We spent the evening in the living room, talking. About Elaine, about childhood memories, about nothing and everything. We laughed, we reminisced. We shared silences that weren't uncomfortable. It was the first time in years that the house felt full, not crowded, not invaded, full. When Amelia finally went upstairs to the guest room, I stayed in the living room a while longer, looking at the old photos, the walls, the bookshelves. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting to die. I felt like I was beginning again. The morning air was unusually crisp, even for July. I had just finished my tea, the house quiet save for the occasional clinking of Amelia washing the cups in the kitchen, when I heard the sound of tires crunching across the gravel outside. Then came the doorbell, sharp, twice. No hesitation. I stood slowly and approached the front door. Through the glass, I saw her, Melania, arms folded, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed with that familiar glint of defiance I had seen since she was 16. I opened the door. "Dad," she said flatly, "we need to talk." Without waiting for permission, she stepped inside, brushing past me like it was still her home. It had once been, long ago, before Darren, before entitlement replaced affection. Amelia stepped into the hallway, drying her hands on a dish towel. She froze at the sight of her mother. Melania glanced at her, surprised, but said nothing. I closed the door and followed them both into the living room. Melania planted herself in the center of the room, not bothering to sit. She looked around like she was inspecting the damage. "I suppose you're proud of yourself," she said coldly. "Turning your back on your family. You've caused a complete mess. Do you have any idea what kind of trouble this has created for us?" I walked slowly to my armchair and sat. "Yes, that's rather the point." She scoffed, folding her arms tighter. "You think this is noble? You've humiliated us. Darren is furious. The kids are confused. You've destroyed everything we've built." "Everything you built?" I said. "Melania, Let me be clear. I built it. With my savings, my support, my name. You were the architect of the illusion. I just kept the lights on. Her jaw clenched. You're twisting everything. No, I said calmly. I'm finally telling the truth. She sat down now, abruptly, as if her legs couldn't hold the weight of the moment anymore. Do you think I don't appreciate what you've done? She asked, quieter now. Of course I do. But things are complicated. Families are complicated. Complicated is forgetting to invite your father to Christmas. 3 years in a row, I said. She winced. Complicated is sending a text to uninvite me from dinner. A dinner I was asked to attend. In my honor, I believe. Her voice rose slightly. That was Darren's call. He didn't feel comfortable, I finished for her. Yes, I know. And you let that stand. You let my presence in your home, a home I paid for, become a problem to solve. Silence. Amelia hovered at the edge of the room, unsure whether to stay or flee. Melania tried again. You're being dramatic. We're family. Families fight. You don't just cut people off. I leaned forward, my hands folded. When was the last time you visited without needing something? She opened her mouth. When was the last time you called just to ask how I was? Her mouth stayed open, but no words came. You've used me for 20 years, I said, voice steady. Not once did you show up for me. Not when Elaine was dying. Not when I buried her. You were late to the funeral. You left early. That's not fair. No, I interrupted. What's not fair is how I kept giving. Even after all that. Even when Darren made snide comments. Even when your birthday passed and I got a group text. Even when I spent Christmas alone, year after year. I have children, she said. I have responsibilities. So did I snapped. I raised you. I supported you. I carried you when you needed it. I never asked for repayment, just respect. And you gave me none. Her voice dropped to a bitter whisper. So this is payback? Revenge for a few slights? I shook my head. This isn't revenge. This is clarity. For years I convinced myself that if I gave more, you'd remember to care. You didn't. And now, I'm done. She looked stunned. Her facade cracked. I changed the will, I continued. I revoked the power of attorney. I canceled every payment. I set up a trust, not for you, not for Darren, but for Amelia. Melania's head snapped toward her daughter. Of course, I should have known. She's the only one who came, I said. She didn't come to argue. She didn't come to beg. She came because she wanted to understand. And she did. I'm your daughter, Melania whispered, eyes glossing over. Doesn't that mean anything? It used to, I said. But love is not loyalty without substance. You loved what I gave you, but you never loved me. The room fell silent. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves. Melania stood suddenly, her voice sharp again. This is cruel. You're old and lonely and bitter, and when you die, no one will even come to your funeral. I stood as well, quietly, firmly. Then let it be empty. Better that than filled with people who only came to see what they could still take. She stared at me, seething, her breathing uneven. Get out, I said softly. There's nothing for you here. Her eyes flicked to Amelia again, then back to me. I saw it. Not anger now, but something worse. Recognition. That she had lost. That the mask had cracked. She walked toward the door in stiff silence. I didn't follow. Amelia did not move. At the threshold, she turned. You'll regret this. I met her gaze. No. For the first time in my life, I won't. She slammed the door behind her. The sound echoed through the house like thunder, then faded, leaving only the ticking of the mantel clock. Amelia crossed the room and stood beside me. You okay? She asked quietly. I exhaled, slow and long. Yes. That was 20 years of silence finally ending. She took my hand and squeezed it gently. We didn't say anything more. There was nothing left to explain. For the first time, my home was no longer a place of transaction. It was a place of truth, and I had finally found peace inside it. By the time the doorbell rang, I already knew who it was. I had been sipping my tea in the kitchen while Amelia read near the window. The day had been peaceful, quiet, the kind of morning that gently reminds you life can still be calm, still be yours. But peace, when it finally arrives, always invites disruption. And right on cue, there it was. A long, purposeful ring. Not impatient, but deliberate. Staged. I stood and made my way to the front door. Through the frosted pane I saw the silhouette. Tall, lean, hair carefully styled, a bakery box held in one hand, the other tucked into the pocket of his blazer like a man about to give a toast. Darren. I opened the door. Matthew, he said brightly, flashing that artificial grin that used to fool me, back when I wanted to believe he cared. Thought I'd stop by. Truce offering. He held up the box. From Le Figuier. Raspberry croissants, your favorite. He waited for a response. I gave him none. May I come in? He asked. I stepped aside. Briefly. He walked in like a man still sure of his footing, scanning the house with barely concealed disdain, as if looking for proof of decline. He placed the box on the coffee table in the living room and sat without invitation. I'll get to the point, he said, opening the lid with a flourish. Things have gotten a bit tense, haven't they? I remained standing. Melania's very upset, he continued. Understandably so. You've cut off all support, changed your will, frozen us out. She feels betrayed. Not as betrayed as I felt reading her message, I said. He raised his hands in mock defense. All right, that was unfortunate. And I've told her, it wasn't worded well. But come on, Matthew. Let's not throw away 20 years over one misunderstanding. Is that what you think this is? I asked. A misunderstanding? I think, he said smoothly, you're acting out of emotion, maybe grief, maybe loneliness. But you're hurting the people who've stood by you. I chuckled. Stood by me? He leaned in, lacing his fingers. Look, I'm not here to fight. We've had our differences, sure, but I've always respected you. Always tried to keep things cordial. Cordial is not respect, Darren. And pretending to like someone while quietly bleeding them dry is not family. He exhaled, dropping the faux cheerful tone. Okay, let's stop dancing around it. You've made a mess, a legal one, financial one. You've upset a balance. And now, Melania's threatening to take this public. Emotional abuse, elder coercion. You know how fast these stories spin online. There it was, the real Darren. I'm not trying to start a war, he said. But if you don't fix this, reinstate the payments, adjust the trust, things are going to get very unpleasant for everyone. I sat across from him, slowly, deliberately. The moment had come, the final performance. I used to think you were just weak, I said calmly, that you were insecure, petty, jealous of everything I'd built. But now I see the truth. You're a parasite, and I've let you feed for far too long. His eyes narrowed. Careful. No. You be careful, I said, voice still steady. You don't scare me. You never did. But I pitied you. That's over now. He sat back, visibly rattled, the smile long gone. I continued. You think threatening me with public disgrace will shake me? I have nothing to hide. But you? Let's talk about those business expenses I covered. The gambling, the quiet cash infusions, the fake consulting invoices. His jaw tightened. You want a legal battle? I said. Let's have one. You've left a trail of manipulation and misuse of funds that a half-decent lawyer could unravel in an afternoon. He stood. You've lost it. No, I've found it. My backbone. My clarity. He grabbed the pastry box and sneered. You're an old man, alone in a dusty house. You think you've won something? I've won myself back, I said, and that's worth more than anything you ever stole. He stormed toward the door. You'll regret this. No, I said quietly, but you already do. I closed the door behind him, slowly, and locked it. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of peace, of resolve, of something I hadn't felt in years, finality. Amelia stepped in from the hallway. Was he? Yes. She looked at me. Are you okay? I nodded. Better than I've been in a very long time. We sat together in the kitchen afterward. No more visitors. No more pretense. And I knew, truly knew, that the last strings had been cut. The performance was over, and the curtain, at last, had come down. It was a Wednesday morning, the sun pouring through the lace curtains, casting soft patterns onto the kitchen floor. Amelia was already up, humming something tuneless as she made coffee, barefoot and unbothered. The radio played softly in the background. Something old, something good. The house had settled into a rhythm I hadn't felt in decades. I sat at the table, the newspaper unread in front of me, my thoughts elsewhere. At precisely 10 a.m., the gate creaked and a familiar whistling tune followed. Liam. He never knocked. Just let himself in like always, calling out as the screen door swung open. House still standing, Matthew? Barely, I called back, standing to greet him. He entered with 2 paper bags and the same unshaven grin he'd worn since the early 70s. One for sustenance, he said, placing down pastries from his favorite bakery, and one for sanity. He lifted the second bag and took out 4 bright lemons from the tree in his garden. For when life gives you a bitter week. I laughed, genuinely. That had become a rare sound in this house until very recently. We settled in the sunroom, the pastries warm, the coffee rich, and the garden in full summer bloom just beyond the glass. Liam always had a way of anchoring the moment, like nothing existed but the conversation in front of him. I told him everything. From the moment I received Melania's message, to the confrontation with Darren, to the quiet evening that followed with Amelia upstairs, and my heart finally still. He didn't interrupt, not once. Just nodded, arms crossed, leaning back like a judge on a bench. When I finished, he whistled long and low. Jesus, he muttered. You really did it. You cut the rope. I had to, I said. There was nothing left to salvage. Liam leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You know what I've always admired about you, Matthew? You give like you breathe, but you forgot that breathing is supposed to be for you too. I stared at my coffee. It's strange. I don't feel angry anymore, not even sad. Just empty, in a good way. Like there's space again. That's not emptiness, he said. That's freedom. We sat in silence for a few minutes, letting that truth settle. The kind of silence only old friends can share comfortably. Then, as if he'd been waiting for the perfect moment, Liam said, So what now? What do you mean? I mean, what do you want to do, now that no one's holding your time hostage? I opened my mouth, then closed it. I had no answer. Not yet. He grinned. Then I've got a suggestion. Italy. Italy? You promised me, he said. Back in '88, we'd hit the road, eat ourselves silly, chase art and history like we were 25. You said we'd go when life got easier. I laughed. Life never got easier. Well, he said, raising an eyebrow, it just did. I looked out at the garden, imagined a cafe in Rome, imagined waking up in a hotel near the Arno, drinking coffee that made you believe in God. It didn't seem far away anymore. What would we do there? I asked. Whatever we want, he said. Walk, eat, wander, sit by fountains and talk about the women we never married and the ones we did. Pretend we're philosophers. Get lost on purpose. The idea filled my lungs like oxygen. No obligations. No one to check in with. No family calendar. No passive-aggressive questions. Just me and my best friend in a country older than regret. I stood and grabbed a notebook from the side drawer. Liam watched, curious. "What's that?" "A list," I said. "Things I've never done. Things I always said I would." And I began to write. Things I've put off doing. Visit Italy, Florence, Rome, Venice, and at least one village with a name I can't pronounce. Learn to paint, even if badly. Read all of Steinbeck, out loud, if possible. Climb Mount Snowdon again, alone this time. Take a train with no destination, just buy a ticket and go. Write a letter to Elaine, not to send, just to speak. Ride in a hot air balloon, because fear isn't a reason. Make lasagna from scratch, the old-fashioned way. Dance again, with music loud enough to wake the neighbors. Speak to Amelia about what she really wants, and listen fully. I read the list aloud, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Liam grinned. "Looks like a manifesto." "It's a beginning," I said. Later that evening, after Liam had gone and Amelia had returned from a walk, I showed her the list. She read it silently, her lips moving as her eyes scanned each line. "This is beautiful," she said. "Can I add something?" "Of course." She borrowed my pen and wrote, 11. Teach me how to live like that. I looked at her and felt something settle in my chest. Not heaviness, not pain, but something like pride. The kind of pride you feel not from success, but from surviving long enough to start again. I folded the list and tucked it into my pocket. The journey wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sitting room when I heard the car outside. Not the slow roll of Liam's pickup or the light buzz of Amelia's hybrid, but the low purr of a German-engineered engine, Darren's car, though this time it wasn't him behind the wheel. I stood quietly in the hallway as I heard the car door shut, the familiar rhythm of high-heeled footsteps approach the porch, and then the knock. Soft, hesitant, but expected. I opened the door to find Melania standing there, her face composed, her coat neatly buttoned, a leather handbag gripped tightly in both hands. Her eyes were shadowed with fatigue, but not apology. "May I come in?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, but let's not pretend this is a social call." She stepped inside, walking with cautious formality as though stepping into unfamiliar territory. The truth was, she hadn't been in this house alone with me in years, not without Darren, not without an occasion or a request. The last time might have been after Elaine passed, and even then, she had only stayed 20 minutes. She sat stiffly on the edge of the sofa, her knees together, back straight, as though sitting in a courtroom. "I've been thinking," she began slowly, her voice careful, "about what you said, about boundaries. I understand now that maybe things got too comfortable. We relied on you too much." I didn't speak. I waited. She took a breath. "But the truth is, Dad, we're struggling. Darren's hours have been cut. The school's raised the tuition again, and I'm working part-time, but it's not enough." There it was. She cleared her throat, the mask of civility cracking ever so slightly. "I was hoping you might reconsider. Just a few of the payments. Temporarily. Just until we stabilize." I nodded slowly and then said what I had come to know was the most difficult word a parent ever says to their child. "No." Her eyes widened slightly, not in surprise. She had expected resistance, but in disbelief that I could deliver the word so simply, so finally. "I'm sorry to hear you're struggling," I said, "but I'm no longer the lifeboat you push off from each time the waters get rough. That ship has sailed." Her expression hardened. "So you're really going to let your own daughter drown?" "No," I said. "I'm giving you the paddle you've refused to use for years." She stared at me, blinking. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've arranged something, I said. A meeting. With Margaret Kane. She's expanding her practice and needs help managing her growing caseload. She needs someone sharp, articulate, capable of learning. I suggested you. Melania's lips parted slightly. She looked stunned. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you an opportunity, I said. A way forward, a clean start. Earn your own way, honestly, fully. She stood abruptly, indignant. That's humiliating. No, I said, rising too. It's adulthood. Something you've long deferred while calling it privilege. I've made my peace with how I've enabled that. But now, if you want my support, it'll come through integrity, not allowances. Her voice trembled now, not with sadness but restrained rage. Do you think I've never worked hard? That I don't deserve the life I built? I met her eyes. You didn't build it, Melania. You inherited it, from my sacrifice. And instead of gratitude, you treated it like obligation. She stepped back as if struck. I gave without asking, I continued, because I loved you, because I thought giving meant I was being a good father. But I see now that I taught you dependency instead of resilience. That stops now. Silence. Long, heavy silence. I never asked to be cut off, she said finally, her voice quieter. Just helped. And I never asked to be used, I replied. We stood there in the center of the room like two ghosts in an old photo, familiar but disconnected. She looked around the room, the framed pictures of family holidays, Elaine's old chair, the books she never touched. Then her eyes found mine again, and something passed between us. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a reluctant understanding. I'll think about it, she said. Please do, I said, because this is the only offer you'll get from me. She didn't reply. She just walked to the door and left. The house was still again. I returned to my chair, not with sadness, but with clarity. Painful clarity, but clarity all the same. I would no longer be a fountain of endless funds, of silent compliance, of boundless sacrifice. That chapter had ended. From this day forward, I would give only values, not money, not silence, not myself. It was a still Sunday afternoon, the kind of day that had always felt sacred in our house. Elaine used to fill the kitchen with the smell of roast chicken and rosemary, the soft hum of a jazz record echoing in the hallway. Now, the silence was different. Not cold, not mournful, just full of possibility. Amelia had gone into town to visit a friend and I was sitting in the study reading when I heard the first car pull up. Then another, and another. 3 cars, doors slamming, footsteps. I stood, spine straightening on instinct. I already knew who it was, or at least who had orchestrated it. By the time I reached the front door, I saw the full delegation gathered on my porch. Melania, Darren, Sandra, Jordan, and 2 faces I hadn't seen in years. Distant cousins whose birthdays I no longer remembered, if I ever had. Melania gave a small, rehearsed smile. Dad, can we come in? Darren stood beside her, arms crossed, posture calculated. He said nothing. He didn't need to. This was his play. I don't recall inviting anyone, I said flatly. We're concerned, Sandra jumped in, stepping forward. We just wanted to talk, family to family. This isn't a family visit, I replied. It's a tribunal. Melania looked around nervously. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, I said. 6 of you show up without warning to stage what? An intervention? A shaming? Or maybe just a last-ditch effort to reassert control? Jordan tried to step in. Uncle Matthew, let's not make this hostile. We just want to understand what's going on. You've made some big changes. Yes, I said. Changes that are none of your concern. We're family, Sandra said, as if that was still currency. No, I corrected her. You're spectators who were summoned by Darren because he thinks numbers equal power. But in this house, only sincerity holds value. A long pause. No one met my eyes. You can all leave, I said. Now. Melania looked stricken. Dad? I will speak to my daughter, I said. I will speak to Darren, because unfortunately, he still clings to this family by virtue of marriage. But the rest of you, you have no stake here. You haven't called in years. You don't know me. You're not entitled to judge me. Sandra opened her mouth to protest, but I held up a hand. Leave. They hesitated, looked to Darren, then shuffled off in silence. No hugs, no well wishes, just the awkward retreat of those who thought they were coming to deliver a verdict, only to find the courtroom already closed. When the door clicked shut behind them, I turned to face Melania and Darren. We stood in the foyer like old ghosts, staring each other down. Darren spoke first. You humiliated us. No, I said. I stopped playing the role you wrote for me. Melania's voice trembled. I didn't ask for any of this. No, you never needed to, I said. You let Darren do the asking and the taking, and you stood by while it happened. Darren's expression darkened. You're bitter. No, I said. I'm finally awake. I walked into the living room. They followed reluctantly, like children summoned to the principal's office. You've lied to our relatives, I said. Twisted the story. Made me out to be unstable. Vindictive. You used their concern to build pressure. You thought I'd cave. You thought I'd crumble under the weight of shame. Darren's mask slipped, just slightly. We were just trying to talk sense into you. No, I said. You were trying to corner me. Melania sat down, suddenly exhausted. It's been hard, she said. The bills, the silence. You cut us off without warning. You cut me off first, I said. From your lives, from your hearts. You used me as a prop, a background figure with a checkbook. She looked away. I have one job now, I continued. To protect the peace I finally earned. You had years of my money, my time, my silence. You get nothing more. Darren leaned forward. You're really going to throw away your family over this? There's no family to throw away, I said. Just obligation masquerading as love, he sneered. So what now? You die alone with your books and your tea, feeling noble? I stood. No. I live free, with people who see me, not my wallet. Melania's eyes glistened, but I didn't flinch. I offered you a path, I said to her. A job, a second chance. You treated it like an insult. She whispered, It was never about the job. It was about feeling cast aside. And how do you think I've felt for 20 years? I asked. Watching your affection ebb and flow with your bank balance? The silence was thick now, but no one had the strength to break it. I forgive you, I said, but I won't carry you anymore. Melania nodded slowly, like someone finally hearing a sentence they'd long delayed. Darren didn't speak again. I walked to the door and opened it. You may go, I said. And when you come back, if you come back, make sure it's not to take, but to give. Not gifts, not excuses, but honesty. They stepped outside. Melania turned briefly, eyes flickering with something like sorrow. I'll think about what you said. Please do, I said. It may be the only thing I've said that matters. And then I closed the door, not with anger, not with triumph, but with finality. The house was mine again. So was my life. 6 months later, I found myself standing on a sun-warmed stone terrace in Tuscany, a glass of chilled white wine in my hand, the olive trees swaying below, and the golden hills of Italy unfolding like a painting. I was 78 years old, with less hair than I once had and a slower gait, but a lightness in my chest I hadn't known since my 20s. Liam stepped out of the villa behind me, holding two small espressos on a tray, wearing a ridiculous sun hat and humming Sinatra. "This place is terrible," he said. "Absolutely dreadful. We should stay forever." I laughed, deeply and without hesitation. We had made good on our promise, or rather, on the dream that had lived between us for 4 decades. We'd wandered the alleys of Florence, marveled at the melancholy grandeur of Venice, eaten our way through Rome. We'd mispronounced menus, danced badly in a Neapolitan square, and once even got lost trying to find a train that didn't exist. It had been perfect. In those months, the ache in my shoulders eased. My days were no longer structured by others' demands. No texts from Darren, no calls from Melania. The silence was not absence anymore. It was peace. They had stopped writing after that last encounter. At first, I expected more schemes, more attempts, but they didn't come. Darren likely realized the legal and financial doors were closed for good. Melania, well, perhaps even she finally understood. The dignity I had reclaimed could not be bartered again. But one bridge remained, and it held strong. Amelia and I wrote each other almost daily. She told me about her classes, her part-time job at the university library, her plans to study urban design. She sent photos of her watercolor sketches, little towns and skylines she imagined building one day. And in her words, in her art, I saw hope, continuity, not the burden of family legacy, but the inheritance of clarity. Her younger brother, my grandson, had also started working. Just a part-time gig at a local bakery, but he was showing initiative. Amelia told me he'd begun paying his own bills. I smiled when I read that. Maybe the line had shifted. I hadn't lost a family. I had revealed its true shape. And in doing so, I'd finally become something I never allowed myself to be. The protagonist of my own life. No longer a victim of expectation. No longer a benefactor traded for inclusion. No longer the background, but the author. Each morning in Italy, I woke when I pleased. I drank coffee without glancing at a phone. I watched the sunrise over ancient stones and felt no guilt for being still. Liam and I had plans next week to visit the southern coast, Positano, perhaps Capri. No maps, just instinct and curiosity. One evening, as we watched the sunset turn the sky to molten gold, Liam said, "You ever think you'd get here?" I thought for a moment. "I think I always wanted to. I just didn't know I was allowed." He nodded. "Funny how long we wait for permission." I smiled. "I'm done waiting." And I meant it.